electors would have to switch sides to make a difference. It's never been done before. Incoming Chief of Staff Reince Priebus saying overturning the results on Election Day is actually not the goal here. Listen.
I think the real question is why the Democrats and why these electors and why MoveOn.org and all of these organizations are doing everything they can to delegitimize the outcome of the election. The reality of all of this and all of these players that are spinning these reports are doing it for a political purpose, which is to delegitimize the outcome of the election.
So we've got Fox Team coverage for you on this. Byron York is on deck. First, let's go to Peter Ducey, who's live at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, where the Trumps will be spending the holidays. Peter, so what does the president-elect think about Democrats and what they're doing here?
He thinks, Martha, that they are getting away with essentially ignoring the fact that his victory is about to be cemented by the Electoral College. And he thinks that's a double standard because right now on the left, there are a lot of voices complaining about the Electoral College, about whether or not that's really the best way to pick a president, and about whether or not it's going to be possible to stop Trump from becoming the president today. So he tweeted this over the weekend: if my many supporters acted and threatened people like those who lost the election are doing, they would be scorned and called terrible names. So what kind of complaining is the president-elect referring to? Well, the latest word from the losing Clinton campaign manager is that he still does not think she would have lost if it wasn't for Russian hackers.
A foreign adversary directly intervened into our democratic institution and tried to tilt the election to Donald Trump. I think that if you look back and see what happened over the course of the last few weeks, you see the way the votes broke. I was highly critical of the way the FBI, particularly the FBI director, managed the situation with respect to the Russian engagement versus Hillary Clinton's emails. I think that all had an effect on the election.
But members of the Trump inner circle are still out there saying they don't think that is right, what Mr. Podesta said. They think that the Clinton loss just had more to do with the fact that she got fewer votes.
Into all of that throughout the course of this morning, Peter. So what does the president-elect have planned for Florida today?
Martha, last night the president-elect had an off-the-record meeting with some of the reporters who are here for the holidays covering him. All of the talk of that was off the record. Later on today, he's going to have some more meetings behind closed doors, high profile. We expect to get a guest list a little bit later on today, but he does still have 2 cabinet positions to fill with Inauguration Day approaching, so he's got some work to do. Martha?
Base of operations now in Palm Beach, Florida for the time being. Peter, good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Not a bad place to hang out.
Not a bad place to hang out.
Sunshine. You would need to actually make history to change this vote. The last time more than one elector did change their vote was before the Civil War. So then you wonder, why is this such a big deal? Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Byron, good day to you on a Monday.
Good morning, Bill.
So in theory, this is the last chance for the Never Trumpers today, correct?
It is indeed. After the electors vote, Donald Trump will be the president. All he has to do is take the oath of office to become president. Now, this group called Hamilton Electors, they call themselves Hamilton Electors, who are trying to convince Republican electors to defect from Trump. About a week ago, they had one Republican elector, a man in Texas, who wrote an op-ed for the New York Times and said he wasn't going to vote for Trump. Now today, a week later, after all this talk about Russian hacking, after all this activism, after all these efforts to persuade people, they still have one Republican elector who says he'll defect from Trump. So it looks like what we're going to have is an electoral college vote in which maybe one, maybe there's 2 electors vote differently than what their voters essentially told them to do. That's what has happened several times in history, and it has never changed the course and outcome of an election.
That's remarkable. 21 states do not require the electors to vote for the winner of that state. 29 states, however, do. That is a high bar, Byron.
Very high bar. As a matter of fact, that is why this group, this anti-Trump group, went to court in a couple of states challenging these laws, and they haven't gotten decisions on that yet. But the bigger thing is, most of these electors, if not all of these electors, say that they are going to vote the way that the majority of voters or the plurality of voters in their states voted. And we just saw a report from Pennsylvania, one of the most hard-fought of the swing states, where all of the electors said, we're going to vote the way Pennsylvania voted, which is for Donald Trump.
You know, Hillary Clinton wasn't the first choice for a lot of Democrats either. But nobody's asking the question as to whether or not electors will vote for Bernie Sanders. Could happen.
Well, the theory behind the Hamilton electors was not to actually elect Hillary Clinton. It was to actually throw the election into the House of Representatives with neither candidate getting 270. A number of these Democrats had said they would be open to voting for some sort of moderate Republican like John Kasich or something. And then somehow, magically, the House of Representatives, dominated by Republicans, many of them from states that Donald Trump won, somehow they would elect somebody other than Trump. But the theory is that a number of Clinton electors would go away as well.
One past point here. The protests are happening in New York City. Not on a grand scale, but they're happening every day, and you can see it over the weekend here in Manhattan. If that is able to spread to Chicago or St. Louis or Atlanta, 2017 could be a rockin' year. Have you given this much consideration for a lot of the stuff that frankly comes out of Brooklyn, New York? What is your expectation?
Yeah, well, it actually could happen. Clearly, the protesters, the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, they were shocked, like a lot of people, on Election Day. They've got their feet back under them. I would expect you'd see a peak in protests around Inauguration Day on January 20th here in Washington. We'll certainly see some of that. But my guess is, if you have some sort of permanent protest structure, it would be more kind of like the Occupy movement, kind of a self-marginalizing movement that Donald Trump, Republicans, and many in the mainstream of politics could look at a small fringe who are not really involved in the mainstream of American politics.
Something to watch, and we shall. Thank you, Byron. Merry Christmas to you, Byron York.
Thank you, Bill.
See you tomorrow, okay, on Tuesday.
Yep.
Thank you, Byron. Martha.
So electors across the country have reported being pressured and intimidated in some cases to change their vote. One Republican elector out of Michigan says that he has received death threats.
I got inundated with Facebook messages, emails, tweets, actually letters to my house. I'm getting like 4 or 5 every day. And a lot of hateful, angry messages, death threats, death wishes. So it's been quite the experience so far.
So Michael Bonarian is going to join us live only hours before he casts his vote as an elector in Michigan. That comes up in just a few minutes from now.
There's an elector down in Texas that says they've gotten 300,000 emails. Oh my, make it stop.
It's like a Harry Potter inundation of mail coming through the mail slots, through the chimney. I mean, can you imagine?
No, I can't.
They have a lot of attention, though. They're probably like, at least everybody knows I'm an elector now, right?
9 minutes past the hour now. The head of the Democratic Party now says they were attacked and emails were the weapon. Watch.
President's party was hacked, not the Democratic Party. The president, he is a Democrat. His party was hacked. The emails were weaponized.
Well, President-elect Trump saying the emails revealed Democratic dirty laundry and nothing more than that. Well, who's right? We're going to have a fair and balanced debate discussion on that coming up in moments here.
Can't wait for that. And a Fox News alert as war crimes continue unpunished in Aleppo. Now a new international push to rescue those who are still there. The innocent children and families that are caught up in that fighting.
Also, a teenager trained to be a suicide bomber by ISIS is now talking. Why he says he could not go through with the terror plot that he helped design.
To tell you about another Mideast humanitarian disaster now, this one in Iraq. Reports of up to 1 million people who are trapped in Mosul as ISIS snipers and car bombers target civilians there. This as Iraqi forces advance street by street to retake the second largest city in that country. U.S. military commanders say the fight has been tougher than they expected, and they warn that it could go on there for months. Look at the scenes of the people in the streets in Mosul right now. Heartbreaking pictures as refugees beg for food. Serious food shortages in the city right now, and they're trying to get it from the workers who are there at a camp about 45 minutes outside of Mosul.
Hillary Clinton and her team spent $1.2 billion, lost an election they should have won, didn't see us coming, and got a lot of help, frankly, from people in the media who are still trying to fight the last war.
I guess what I'm
is over. This man is the president.
That has not stopped the campaign to move electors to switch their vote today. My next guest says he has received all kinds of attention, including harassment and even death threats. Michael Benarian, elector who will cast his vote today in Lansing, Michigan. He's also the youth vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Michael, good morning to you. You've gotten all kinds of attention in the last week. Thank you for your time. Did you vote for Donald Trump?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
did you
my whole household did.
It did. Did you vote for him in the primary season as well, Michael?
No, I was actually a Marco Rubio supporter through the primary, but once it came around to the general, it was a pretty easy choice between the two candidates.
Okay. What will you do today in Lansing?
So what we're doing is we meet in Lansing for a special session in the Senate, and we'll officially tally our votes for President and Vice President of the United States. That vote is then certified by the governor of the state of Michigan and sent to Washington, D.C., where the Vice President tallies those votes in front of a joint session of Congress.
I'm assuming today you vote Trump, correct?
Absolutely. Myself and the 15 other electors from Michigan.
So that's 16 from Michigan. What has this story been like for you when you relay the media stories of death threats? What's that all about, Michael?
Yeah, so the divisiveness of the political cycle just bled over into the weeks following the election, and myself and other electors received thousands of letters, emails, Facebook messages. I got 3,000 letters to my house in the last 3 days. It's been pretty crazy, and unfortunately I've received death threats. People talking about putting a bullet in the back of my mouth, burning my family, sending me pictures of a noose, and saying that if I don't vote for Hillary Clinton, they'll get me. Just some really nasty, disappointing messages from people from across the country.
What was the impact on you? Did it give you pause or not, Michael?
Well, I think it's one of those things where these guys are just bullies, and you can't let bullies get to you because then they win. So I've chosen to not let it bother me that much. I mean, I obviously am disturbed by these messages, but I reported them to the police, and I feel that they're handling it appropriately, and it's made me very confident in my safety. So I think you just got to lower the shoulder and trudge on, because if you let these bullies win, they get what they want, and they don't deserve it. So.
Some other electors want to look at that intelligence briefing before today, and that's not going to happen. When you heard about that, is that something that you were interested in, Michael?
No, I laughed when I heard about it, because I think it's pretty ridiculous. There's no precedent for giving national security briefings to presidential electors based on a rumor that's come out about the CIA. We had, I think, the New York Times article that reported on this said that their sourcing from the CIA was just an anonymous source and nothing beyond that. And if that's the precedent that we're setting for average American electors to then start receiving national security briefings, I think it's pretty ridiculous. I think the FBI also had refuted some of these claims. So there's a lot of conflict here, and I'm confident that if there was any Russian hacking or anything into the DNC or anything like that, it'll be handled accordingly and we'll have it investigated. But I don't think it's appropriate to have presidential electors receiving intelligence briefings before the vote.
Well, we're receiving word out of Texas that at least one elector in that state will not vote for Donald Trump. That would be history. It may not make a difference in the end. We don't believe it will. What do you think of that as a Republican colleague?
Well, I think it's absolutely shameful what that man is doing in Texas, because if you look at the facts of the situation, his arguments don't hold any water. So he was elected at the Texas GOP state convention as an elector for the Republican nominee for president and vice president. He signed a legal affidavit saying that he would do so. He then appeared on the November 8th ballot as an elector for Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And millions of Texans voted for him as an elector for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, not a rogue elector. So to be that deceptive to the voters and think that your opinion is somehow better than the millions of people of your own state who told you to send that message for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's shameful. And I think he's going to be the only Republican, the lone Republican out there that's going to be doing that this election cycle.
You think he's the only one?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see anybody else doing what he's doing. I know, especially in Michigan, all 16 of us are very confidently and proudly going to deliver the message that the Michigan voters sent on November 8th.
200,000 emails have been received by one elector also in the state of Texas. Now, you shared a little bit about why they're contacting you. What do you think this is all about?
Well, I mean, they want us to change our votes. It's pretty clear, and I think a lot of these messages are coming from people who really just don't understand the Electoral College. And I think it's important that people understand that we have this process in place for the specific reason that every American has a voice in this process, so that big states with large populations, dense populations like California and New York don't dominate every single election cycle that we have. States like Wyoming, New Hampshire, and all of these smaller states in middle America have a voice in this process. I believe Hillary Clinton, her popular vote lead is coming, almost all of it, out of 3 counties in California, while Donald Trump won geographically far more than 80% of the United States, middle America, the Midwest. So I think it's important that people kind of reevaluate this and look at why the Electoral College was put into place. It was not put into place.
That's a very interesting answer. You know what she would argue? She'd say, I've got 2.8 million more votes than Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, like I said, the large populated states on the East and West Coast are what are providing her that large lead. And I think if you look at the diverse vote that Donald Trump has received, not just from the states, but demographically, you'll find that he is representing the majority of America, agriculture, industry, things like that. So I think that it's not an argument that holds water, and this system was not put into place so that 538 elites could get together and decide what is the best leader for everybody else. It was put in place so that everyone has a voice in the process.
Been a pretty good civics lesson, hasn't it? I bet you've learned some things along the way too, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an interesting process, and I think the unfortunate thing that I've learned is that a lot of Americans are not as informed on this process as they probably should be.
Oh. What time do you vote today?
So we vote at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
And
in Michigan. We'll watch it. Thank you, Michael, for your time. Michael Benarian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
From Michigan today. You bet. Thanks for coming on. Martha, what's next?
All right. So the excuses and the rationalizations for the Clinton loss continue. John Podesta refusing to call the presidential election fair and free. He says Putin hacked the election because he, quote, wants Trump as his lapdog. Karl Rove is here to respond to all of that later this hour.
Also, the president-elect with 2 events over the weekend with another message for China. Do not bother giving back the drone that you stole from the waters underneath the Pacific. Rather, you can keep it. That was his message. New diplomatic troubles or something more? We'll dive into that in a moment.
Maybe they saw the success that the Iranians had after they captured 2 American vessels and put American sailors on their knees. There's no strength on the part of the United States of America.
Breaking news on a Monday from Trump Tower. Another nomination for the president-elect. Fox News confirms moments ago Trump will nominate Vincent Viola for Secretary of the Army. He's a West Point grad, U.S. Army veteran, trained as an airborne ranger, infantry officer, served in the 101st Airborne Division. He's long been engaged, we're told, with national security issues, according to the release from the Trump team. Even after his military service, he's been in private business as well, owns that NHL team in the state of Florida. So he's getting the nod. His name will be put forth in nomination come January. So that's the news from this moment.
The very latest. So meanwhile, U.S. officials now telling Fox News that China will return the drone that they seized, and that will happen as early as tomorrow morning. There'll be an exchange between the ships, the ship that took this drone, and our ship will receive it in the open waters there. The Chinese military say that they found the underwater drone while they were collecting unclassified scientific data in the South China Sea. But President-elect Trump telling China not to bother, tweeting, "We should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back. Let them keep it." Our next guest is the author of the book Warrior Diplomat, Michael Waltz, former Green Beret commander and former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, and a Fox contributor. Good to have you here this morning, Michael. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much.
So let me first get your thoughts on this breaking news for the new Secretary of the Army, Vince Viola. He's an interesting person. He sort of combines the things that we have seen most strongly focused so far in the Trump team, which is military and very strong business expertise as well.
Well, that's right. And I think this is, let me be clear, this is a great pick. Mr. Viola, also spent a good amount of time in the Army Reserves, so he was able to continue his Army career and stay plugged into those issues, understand what the Army was going through as it evolved, but then also build his business career. And I think you're absolutely right. It's in this kind of common vein of bringing business expertise to our foreign policy and national security bureaucracy, where frankly you have to get things done. You know, in the business world, the bottom line matters most. You can't just let things kind of foster and linger. And I think Mr. Viola is going to bring that mindset to the Army, and I'm excited to see the pick.
Yeah, he got very involved after September 11th with his concern with counterterrorism. He's a New Yorker, so obviously he and Donald Trump share that history, and he raised his family here as well. So we're going to hear a lot more about Vince Viola. In so many ways, he seems to fit the mold of what we're seeing in terms of character and background experience that we've seen in a lot of these individuals that have been chosen so far. Michael, I want to get your thoughts on this incident with China over the weekend. What do you think about this whole thing?
Well, I'm hoping the Chinese paid more attention to Mr. Trump, the President-elect Trump's first tweet, which said this was an unprecedented act, we shouldn't stand for it, and to give it back. I can guarantee you the U.S. Navy wants it back because they know that the Chinese probably spent the last several days under the hood of this underwater drone, looking at every sensor, how it communicates, and just how the thing operates. You know, one of the biggest pieces that the Chinese Navy is putting funding and emphasis on is its submarine fleet as it expands in its very aggressive posture in the South and East China Seas. And just as aerial drones were kind of the big hottest thing 10 years ago, now these undersea drones are also very new, and the Chinese want to figure out how we're doing it, steal our technology like they're doing through these various cyber hacks, and catch up with us.
Yeah, you know, you say you hope that they spend more time paying attention to the first tweet. The second tweet is the one that said, you know, forget it. We don't want it back, because I would imagine the underlying thinking is that you've already got everything you want off of that thing, and point well taken. So you don't agree with that?
Well, you know, I'm not sure why where the shift came from, or what the president-elect was thinking in that regard, but you know, I am encouraged by his stance thus far, in taking the call from the Taiwanese president and really sending the signal to China that this relationship needs to change. That it's been kind of go along and get along for the last 37 years since 1979, where, you know, China needed to be helpful with North Korea, stabilize the trade routes leading through this South and East China Sea to Japan and South Korea, and essentially be, you know, a positive actor on the world stage. I don't think that's been the case, and we haven't even talked about, again, these massive cyber intrusions that have been the largest theft of U.S. technological superiority, you know, in modern history.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating to watch the pre-inauguration testing and sort of back and forth between these countries, and this incident with China over the weekend, I think no doubt is a test to throw out in front of Donald Trump and see how he responds to it. And it'll be good to see the negotiation as it takes place in the water today and whose terms that happens on. Michael, thank you very much. Great to see you this morning.
Hey, thanks, Martha.
Right
Happy
about
holidays.
9:30 now in New York. A top Democrat saying the party is under attack from foreign forces and emails are the weapon of choice. How Republicans are now responding.
I think what the Democrats ought to do is look in the mirror and face the reality that they lost the election. And they lost the election because they're so and completely out of touch with the American people that they're still shell-shocked and they can't believe it.
Getting news from overseas now. A teenager trained by ISIS now speaking out about a failed bombing attempt. Mahmoud Ahmed arrested in August while attempting to carry out a suicide bombing at a soccer stadium in Iraq, 15 years old, telling Sky News he knew it was wrong when he saw the other kids as he approached his target. Wow. He returned to his trainer saying he could not go forward, but was ordered to go back, and that is when he was arrested by police. He says he was trained at an ISIS camp for kids where they were taught suicide bombings, how to use machine guns, and shown videos of beheadings. He's being held on terrorism charges at a juvenile detention center today.
What a story.
This was a very intrusive process. The president's party was hacked, not the Democratic Party. The president, he is a Democrat. His party was hacked. The emails were weaponized. The release of stolen, hacked emails caused a lot of confusion. And of course, it disrupted our daily campaign lives.
That is interim DNC chairwoman Donna Brazile on the magnitude of the Russian email hack. She says that the DNC was overwhelmed by the cyber attacks and that the leaks kept coming every hour of every day, even after President Obama told Putin to knock it off. Marianne Marsh is a former senior advisor to John Kerry. Kristen Soltis Anderson is columnist for the Washington Examiner and Republican pollster and the author of The Selfie Vote. Ladies, welcome. Good to see you both this morning. Kristen, let me start with you, because you say that you were in the green room yesterday doing the same show with Donna Brazile, and that you were sympathetic to what she had to say.
Well, I mean, I like Donna. She's very kind to me. And you know, the thing is that when WikiLeaks put these emails out there in the public, you know, WikiLeaks always says they're about transparency. But when these emails were released, they weren't released as one big dump saying, hey, world, take a look at this. It was sort of drip, drip, drip over time. They began some of these leaks around the time of the Access Hollywood tapes. But that kind of got, of course, that story was the one that was the bigger story. And so over time, these things dribbled out. But I do think that Democrats are running into a big problem when they make the case that the election was hacked. There's a difference between John Podesta's email was hacked, things were put out and introduced into this campaign that probably shouldn't have been in the public domain, and the idea that Donald Trump's win is illegitimate. And I think that's a big problem, is that Democrats are conflating the two. We should be able to say that, yes, Russia and WikiLeaks were trying to intervene in our elections and that was bad. It doesn't mean that Donald Trump's win has to come with this asterisk.
Yeah, I mean, here's a couple things that I just don't get about the argument on this, Marianne, and maybe you can help me out here. You know, they're basically saying, you know, we were embarrassed. We were sort of stumbling over the fact that we had to deal with personal emails that were getting put out into the atmosphere every single day. Now, I can see why that would be distracting to a campaign. However, nobody's arguing that the contents of these weren't real. So what we got to see was embarrassing emails between coworkers. Now, that is embarrassing, but it isn't necessarily, you know, the tactic may have been evil, but it's not manipulating the information. And why is it that they are so concerned and wishing for government help on this email issue, and yet they felt that everybody should just ignore the fact that there was an unsecured server at Hillary Clinton's house that foreign governments, most likely, the FBI told us, had access to?
Well, I mean, Martha, there's so much there. Let's start.
Well, go
ahead. First of all, I think we were at the convention together in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The use of these WikiLeaks were dropped at specific times, you know, on the eve of the convention, during debates and other times. And as we know, factually, WikiLeaks was covered second only to Hillary Clinton's emails. So the entire campaign, for the most part, except for a few precious days here and there, were consumed by WikiLeaks and emails, number one. Number two, we don't know, as we speak right now, whether there were WikiLeaks emails that were fabricated. And in fact,
no one has ever said that there were. Nobody came forward and said,
here,
see that email with my name on it?
Martha,
I didn't write it.
Martha, here's the problem. We have not heard from FBI Director James Comey on the WikiLeaks. He hasn't told us whether they are authentic or there were fabricated emails. Where is the letter? Why hasn't he gone to Congress?
Look, if an email came out
on any of this,
with your name on it or my name on it, and it was something you never wrote,
Martha,
wouldn't you say so?
As I've said on this show previously, I have no doubt someday we will find out that some of those emails were fabricated. Perhaps not the ones in the beginning, because they tried to establish credibility. But the back end, I promise you, and the fact that there were fabricated emails and that every media outlet that reported on them became part of a propaganda machine.
But for the most part, they were gossipy and they made people look bad for saying things that were embarrassing, right? On the other hand, you have an unsecured server that had classified information on it that the Democrats were saying shouldn't matter to people.
No, Martha, actually, in all of this, Hillary Clinton's probably the only one who did not get hacked. That's the irony here. She probably never got hacked, and everybody else did.
There's a little bit of twisted logic there, I think. Kristen, go ahead.
Well, I do think that this argument that it should be up to Jim Comey to come out and say that these emails were real or fake, I don't think that's his job. I think his job, and all of the jobs of our intelligence agencies, is to evaluate the who is doing this and why they're doing it. And that's where they're coming out now, and they're all beginning to get more on the same page and say, look, this was Russia. I have no doubt that Russia was involved in this. I am not, you know, we've seen a lot of talk recently, are Republicans becoming too cozy with Russia over this? I don't think that's the case, but I do think that the problem is that we're conflating. Did Russia do something wrong here? Was Russia involved with WikiLeaks? Yes, I think absolutely. And I think we need to be able to develop the capabilities to do something about it, that when President Obama comes out and says, I told Putin to knock it off, and he knocked it off. I mean, you had Donna Brazile on TV saying, no, that's not the case. They didn't just knock it off because Barack Obama said so. We need to get serious about cybersecurity, but that's a fundamentally different thing than did Russia illegitimately steal this election for Donald Trump, and I think we need to separate those two questions.
I mean, that's a leap that I think people will get to in time. However, you know, I just keep going back to the main point here, which is you can't be outraged when your emails are stolen if you're not outraged when a server is left exposed that has classified information on it that doesn't deal with gossipy, you know, inside campaign stuff. But we're going to leave. Quick thought, Marianne.
Martha, one quick point. Comey, 11 days before the election, came out and talked about possible emails, and then there was nothing there. Yet we've not heard one word from James Comey on anything about WikiLeaks, and it clearly played a role in this election. That is shameful.
All right, point made. Thank you very much, you guys. Good to see you both.
So the interim head of the DNC, not the only one blaming the Russians for influencing the election. Here is John Podesta.
You didn't answer the question. Do you believe this was a free and fair election?
Well, I think it was distorted by the Russian intervention. Let's put it that way.
And what does distorted mean?
So that's Hillary Clinton's campaign manager refusing to say the race between Clinton and Trump was fair. So what's Karl Rove got to say about that now? We'll talk to him live in a moment in studio.
And look at this. This is not what you want to happen when you get on your snowboard out there, Bill. A day on the slopes took a pretty dangerous turn for one man. So what happened here, and how did it all turn out? Live from Fox News capital of the world, Midtown Manhattan, all dressed up for Christmas. Take a look, folks. There it is. Are these going to fit on your tree?
Like Christmas.
They're all lined up for you.
Everywhere you go.
So some new video of terrifying moments on the slopes. Check this out. A snowboarder got caught on the chairlift. The snowboard's safety leash reportedly got clipped to the chairlift. He can be seen dangling here. This is not what you want to happen. This is in Mount Ashland, Oregon, just over a week ago, where they've had quite a bit of snow. The lift was stopped. Rescuers were able to get the victim down with no injuries reported, but boy, everybody was holding their breath for a little while on that one, and thankfully everybody's okay.
It's like Hemmer sometimes on the slope, saying a prayer.
I think the Russians clearly intervened in the election. Clinton got 2.9 billion more votes than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is claiming the Electoral College victory, and tomorrow the electors will get to vote.
You didn't answer the question. Do you believe this was a free and fair election?
Well, I think it was distorted by the Russian intervention. Let's put it that way.
And what does distorted mean? Let me ask you this then. So
a foreign adversary directly intervened into our democratic institution and tried to tilt the election to Donald Trump.
John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager from Sunday, blaming the Russians clearly for Hillary Clinton's loss, in part calling President-elect Trump Vladimir Putin's lapdog. Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor in studio today. Nice to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you.
It's a special day when we have you in the flesh.
Well, thank you.
So Podesta said Russia clearly intervened. To what extent, and when do we see the evidence?
Yeah. Well, look, we know that they were behind the hacking. I accept the word of the CIA and FBI. I do. And look, this ought to be thoroughly investigated, not by a special committee, but by the regular committees of Congress, Senate and House Intelligence Committee, in my opinion. But to what effect? The day before the October 7th WikiLeaks release, in the Real Clear Politics average, Hillary Clinton was at 48%. And on Election Day, she got 48.08%. The absence of a compelling message to vote for her, a dreadful candidate who came down the end and sounded like, I'm more of the same, status quo, elect me because I deserve it. They're blaming the Russians for the failure of the Clinton campaign to actually have a campaign. And I thought it was pathetic yesterday that after piously lecturing the American people that Donald Trump ought to accept the outcome of the election, that they are now not accepting the outcome of the election.
So you were hot on fire in Fox News Sunday, and that continues today. I appreciate the vigor and the enthusiasm. What is the means to the end here for Democrats? What is their objective prior to inauguration.
Well, look, I'm sort of passionate about this because I see this is deja voodoo all over again. I saw this after the 2000 election when they tried to delegitimize George W. Bush's election. We had Paul Begala and James Carville. We had the Democratic leader in the House on Meet the Press on December 18th, twice asked by Tim Russert, do you think George Bush is a legitimately elected president of the United States? And twice Dick Gephardt, who's a good man, said no. And yesterday, John Podesta attempted to do the same thing 16 years later with the incoming president of the United States. It is not good for our country when we have people like that, particularly people who have piously and hypocritically lectured the American people on the necessity of supporting the outcome of the election, who then turn around and don't support the outcome of the election.
My feeling
and
that
not only do that, but also say things that are inaccurate, as he said many times yesterday in that.
If you're right about that, I'm looking around Manhattan, I see over the weekend, protests. Maybe it's 100 people here, maybe it's 200 people over there. So if you are right to delegitimize Trump when he is sworn in office, does the left stop the protests, or do they get bigger?
No, they don't. They don't stop what they're doing because, look, this is a way for them to raise money. Internet appeals to raise money. It is. We saw it in Stein. Let's go out and raise $5 million overnight to contest the election in 3 Great Lakes states because Hillary Clinton had the election stolen from her. Well, it turned out Donald Trump got more votes as a result of those recounts. Look at it on MoveOn.org and the Progressive Coalition. All these left-wing groups, they needed to collect members, get names, get internet, get email addresses, and raise money.
Wow.
And this is going to continue.
So you support the investigation or the hearing or whatever comes of that, right?
Sure.
And President Obama says he wants the report out before he leaves office. That's 3 weeks into January. I don't know.
No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen before the president leaves office, and it shouldn't. He's rushing in order to have it done while he's in office so that he can be the pontificator in chief. This ought to be done in the normal course and in a bipartisan way through the House and Senate Intelligence.
So your job is to figure out why people vote the way they do, and you're damn good at, as a matter of fact. I thought your piece in the Wall Street Journal last week was telling the many Democratic excuses for defeat. I found this on Politico, how Clinton lost Michigan. Apparently they had Democratic operatives all over the state looking for direction, and they could not get it because the headquarters for the Clinton team would not provide it for them.
Well, not only that, but some people were dispatched to go to Iowa, which they were clearly going to lose, and the Michiganders said, no, we want those people to be in Michigan. And Brooklyn, the Clinton headquarters, calls them and reads them the riot act for not dispatching the buses full of volunteers to Iowa. They were going to lose Iowa. Iowa, they were consistently behind in the polling. Michigan was tightening, and the Michiganders said, keep them at home.
One last point. Saw this on another network earlier today, CNN. The biggest challenge is getting out of our bubbles. That's a quote from Clinton supporters saying they need to understand Trump voters. So what is happening in that?
Well, John Podesta and Donna Brazile and others are showing that they aren't getting out of their bubble. They are fortifying their bubble. They're staying in this. We didn't lose the election because we lacked a compelling message. We didn't lose the election because we had a lousy candidate. We didn't lose the election because we were far too left-wing. We didn't lose the election because we were status quo in a year in which people want to change. We didn't lose the election because we're a bunch of smart people sitting in Brooklyn condescendingly looking down at America. No, that isn't true. Something else kept us from winning. And in reality, the Democratic Party will not begin to heal itself until it gets rid of that attitude and accepts the fact that it lost the election to Donald Trump because they had a lousy candidate, a lousy message, a left-wing attitude, and the American people didn't buy it.
Nice to get you out of Austin. Thank you,
sir.
Good
to be here.
Nice
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Good to see you, Carl. All right, so a race against time, as we have discussed, in the war-torn country of Syria to help thousands of civilians who are trapped in Aleppo. The UN Security Council voting on a resolution this morning calling for UN officials to monitor the evacuations. You may wonder why this took so long. More to come.
Also, America, Hollywood, remembering the life of Zsa Zsa Gabor, leaving us at the age of 99.
A kiss.